The bridge of the human battleship Resolute was quiet when the sound first arrived. It was not a normal message. It came as a broken wave of static, then a weak voice repeating words that no one could fully understand. The crew turned their heads toward the speakers, listening. Commander Ryan stood at the center, his eyes fixed on the screen where the signal was displayed as a series of faint pulses. The communication officer adjusted controls, trying to clean the sound. After a few seconds, the words became clearer. "We beg for help, we are hunted." The voice was not human. It was higher, softer, full of fear. Then the message repeated again. Ryan crossed his arms, studying the sound. "Origin?" he asked. "Outer Rim," replied the officer. "Coordinates locked." "The signal is weak, but steady. Whoever they are, they're close to collapse." The crew exchanged quiet looks. Everyone on the Resolute knew the weight of such a call. Humanity had spread among the stars only recently compared to the older species. Many saw humans as dangerous, forged by their harsh world of origin. They were called Deathworlders, beings who grew strong in a place where even nature seemed ready to strike. The name carried fear and respect. Now, that reputation was about to be tested once again. Ryan turned toward the helm. "Set a course. Bring us to the signal's source." The order brought movement. Engines flared, and the giant warship began its shift in direction. At the same time, Fleet Command was contacted. Within minutes, orders came back, all nearby ships were to rally. A rescue operation was being prepared. Humanity would not ignore a call for help. The Resolute's crew worked quickly. Officers reported their stations ready, engineers checked power levels, and pilots of smaller escort craft strapped into their seats. Every person on board felt the same pressure. They did not know who had sent the message, but they knew this: if the call was genuine, then lives were at stake. Ryan stood quietly, letting his crew move with practiced speed. He was not a man who spoke too much. His style was steady, controlled. He gave only the words that mattered. And right now, only one thing mattered: getting to that signal in time. Hours passed as the fleet gathered. Ships of different sizes joined, frigates fast and sharp, cruisers heavy with weapons, and carriers filled with squadrons of fighters. More than a dozen vessels assembled under one banner. They all listened to the repeating voice of the alien distress call as they traveled together. It filled the silence between crew members, a reminder of why they were moving at such speed. Some of the younger crew whispered among themselves. What kind of people had sent the message? Were they like the friendly species humanity had traded with before, or were they strangers who had never seen a human face? No one knew. Yet the question only added to the tension. When the fleet entered the final jump, the message grew stronger. Static shook the speakers, but the same words returned: "We beg for help, we are hunted." There was no anger in the voice, no demand, only fear and desperation. Ryan looked out at the stars from the bridge viewport. His jaw tightened. He thought about Earth, about how humanity had once been alone and weak under the vast sky of their home world. If no one had answered their cries in those days, they would not be standing here now. That memory was enough for him. "Prepare all weapons," he ordered. "Not because we plan to fire first, but because something out there is hunting them. And if it comes near us, it will learn what Deathworlders can do." The crew answered with firm voices. Energy levels rose across the ships. Fighters were readied, shields charged. The fleet moved together, every engine glowing bright in the dark void. At last, the final coordinates appeared. The Resolute's navigation officer counted down. 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into lines as the fleet entered warp. For a moment, there was only silence. Then they broke back into normal space. What they saw made the crew lean forward in shock. Before them hung a world broken and scarred. A planet's surface was blackened, its oceans burning with fire that glowed even in the dark. Around it drifted fragments of shattered cities, ruined ships, and falling satellites. The signal was coming from somewhere within this wreckage. "By the stars," whispered one officer. "What happened here?" Ryan said nothing. He only looked at the planet, then at the faint marker on his screen that showed the distress signal still calling. Somewhere in that graveyard, survivors were waiting. "Bring us closer," he commanded. His voice was calm, but every person on the bridge felt the edge in it. Humanity had answered the call. Now they would discover what force had destroyed this place and if it was still near. The fleet moved as one, cutting through the silence of space, carrying with them both hope and fury. The signal played again, soft and broken, but still alive. The hunt had begun. The human fleet slowed as it reached the ruined planet. The ships spread out in a careful formation, scanning the wreckage for danger. From the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Ryan watched the shattered world turn slowly below. The surface showed scars from bombardments, wide craters glowing faintly with fire. It looked as if the planet itself had been torn apart by endless strikes. "Signal is stronger now," reported the communication officer. "Source is in orbit. A small vessel, badly damaged." Ryan gave a short nod. "Bring us closer. Keep shields high." The fleet adjusted course. Their formation shifted so that escort frigates took the lead, while heavier cruisers and carriers remained behind to cover. The ruined world filled the viewports as they passed over the wreckage of fallen stations and silent warships. The sight was grim, but none on the bridge looked away. Every fragment told the same story of people who had been crushed under overwhelming force. Then the small vessel appeared. It was spinning slowly, its hull cracked and leaking faint streams of gas into the void. Its engines were dark, and its surface was scorched with burns. Despite the damage, it still carried a faint energy signature. "Lock on," Ryan ordered. The communications officer tried to open a channel. For a moment, only static returned. Then, a shaky voice answered, the same one they had been hearing on repeat. It spoke words that were now more understandable. "Help us, please, we cannot hold." Ryan gave a calm reply. "This is Commander Ryan of the human fleet. We have received your call. You are not alone." There was silence, then a whisper came back through the line. "Humans. Deathworlders." The voice was filled with both fear and wonder. "They know us," murmured one officer. The alien ship struggled to adjust its spin. A small beacon lit on its side, signaling its position. With great care, one of the human frigates moved closer and extended docking clamps. Engineers and medics were prepared, ready to receive survivors. When the airlock finally connected, a soft hiss filled the chamber as the alien hatch opened. Out stepped a group of thin figures, their movements weak but graceful. Their skin was pale, with faint blue patterns running along their arms and faces. Their large dark eyes blinked rapidly as they looked at the armored humans standing before them. These were the Vera, a species known in distant trade routes but rarely seen by most humans. They were builders of art and keepers of knowledge, not soldiers. Now they looked fragile, their clothes torn, their hands trembling as they stepped onto the human deck. One of them, taller than the rest, moved forward. His voice shook, but he tried to speak clearly. We are the last. Our world is gone. The Korth hunted us, destroyed our cities, burned our skies. We sent the call, but we did not think anyone would come. Ryan stood before them, his expression steady. You called. We answered. The Vero looked at the commander, their eyes wide. They whispered among themselves, repeating the word Deathworlders like both a warning and a prayer. To them, humans were both feared and respected across the stars. Yet here they were, standing in defense of the weak. Medics stepped forward and guided the survivors to safety. The Vero moved slowly, some stumbling, but they followed. A child among them clung to an elder, her small hands shaking as she looked at the towering human soldiers. One of the medics crouched and offered a gentle hand. The child hesitated, then took it, finding unexpected comfort. As the survivors were led to medical quarters, Ryan turned back to the viewport. His eyes narrowed at the shattered world outside. The Vera's words rang in his mind, the Korth hunted us. He knew of the Korth. Raiders who struck without mercy, taking worlds apart piece by piece. They were not interested in building or creating, only in crushing and feeding on the weak. If they had done this to the Vera home world, then they would not stop here. Commander, said the tactical officer suddenly. Long-range scans show movement. Multiple signatures. Ships entering the system. The bridge grew tense. Ryan's jaw tightened as the data streamed in. The Korth were coming. He spoke in a calm but firm voice. Sound battle stations. All ships prepare for engagement. Protect the survivors at all costs. Alarms echoed through the fleet as crews rushed to positions. Fighters were deployed, carriers opened their bays, and weapons came online. The fleet formed a defensive wall around the damaged Vera vessel and the Resolute. On the screens, the Korth ships appeared one by one, tearing into real space like hunters smelling blood. Their vessels were dark and sharp, shaped like blades cutting across the void. Energy crackled along their hulls as their weapons came alive. The Vera survivors saw them appear through the medical bay windows. Fear filled their eyes. One whispered, "They have found us again. We will not escape." But this time, they were not alone. This time, the humans stood in front of them. Commander Ryan raised his hand and gave the order. His voice was calm, almost quiet, yet it carried to every ship in the fleet. Hold the line. Show them what it means to face Deathworlders. The fleet shifted formation, steel and fire ready. The Korth advanced with mocking confidence, expecting another easy victory. But the humans did not retreat. Their engines burned bright, their weapons locked on target, their crews unafraid. The battle was about to begin. The human fleet held its position as the Korth warships tore into real space. The void shimmered, and then dark shapes emerged, sharp-edged and built for war. Their hulls were jagged, as if designed to strike fear before the first shot was ever fired. One after another, more ships appeared until a dozen hung before the ruined planet. On the bridge of the Resolute, tension filled the air. Commander Ryan studied the tactical display. Red markers filled the screen, each one representing an enemy vessel. The humans were outnumbered. Enemy vessels powering weapons, reported the tactical officer. They are moving into attack formation. The comm channel crackled as a harsh voice filled the bridge. It was the Korth commander, his tone mocking. Deathworlders. You dare place yourselves in our path? This is not your fight. Leave now, or we will grind you into the same dust as these weaklings you shelter. The words carried arrogance. The Korth had crushed countless species before. They expected humanity to hesitate, maybe even retreat. Ryan did not move. His voice was calm as he answered. We do not run. You prey on the helpless, but you will not touch them again. Laughter echoed back through the channel. Then you will die with them. The line went dead. The moment of silence broke as alarms lit up across the Resolute. The Korth moved in, weapons flashing. Bright lances of energy cut through the void, streaking toward the human ships. Shields up, Ryan ordered. All ships, fire at will. The first wave struck. Human shields flared under the impact, but they held. Then the human fleet answered. Cannons roared, launching streams of fire that lit the darkness. Missiles streaked out in sharp trails, exploding against enemy hulls. The battle erupted. Fighters launched from the carriers, darting between the massive ships like swarms of metal insects. They dodged enemy fire, delivering precise strikes to weak points in the Korth formations. Explosions rippled across the black sky as the first Korth frigate broke apart, shattered by concentrated fire from 3 human cruisers. On the alien transport ship, the Vera survivors watched from the medical bay windows. Their voices were hushed, their eyes wide. They had seen battles before, but never like this. The humans did not scatter. They did not retreat. They moved with ruthless precision, every ship holding its line as if the fleet were one single being. The Vera child who had clung to the medic whispered softly, "They fight like fire itself." Back on the Resolute, Ryan stood steady, calling orders with a voice that cut through the chaos. Frigates, break their flank. Carriers, launch second wave. Target their destroyer before it closes distance. His commands were sharp, each one bringing results. A squadron of human fighters dove toward the nearest Korth destroyer, releasing a wave of torpedoes. The enemy ship tried to shield itself, but the combined strike was too much. Fire tore across its hull, and the massive vessel split apart in a bright explosion. But the Korth fought fiercely. Their ships were built for intimidation, and they pressed forward with brutal force. A human frigate took a direct hit, its shields collapsing in a burst of sparks. The crew barely had time to launch escape pods before the ship broke apart, scattering fragments across space. The loss burned through the fleet, but no one faltered. Instead, it fueled their determination. Ryan's eyes stayed locked on the display. He knew the Korth expected fear. They fed on it. But humans had lived with danger since the beginning of their history. To them, fear was only a spark that made them fight harder. Push them back, Ryan said quietly. Show them who we are. The fleet shifted again, turning their line into a spear. With brutal speed, the humans struck at the center of the Korth formation. The Resolute led the charge, its heavy cannons tearing holes in enemy shields. Cruisers on either side added their fire, punching through with relentless strikes. For the first time, the Korth hesitated. Their formation wavered under the storm. A commander on one of their ships shouted orders, but the fear was already growing. The humans were not breaking. They were pressing forward. The Vera elder, standing near the viewing glass, whispered in awe. They are Deathworlders, but they fight not for conquest. They fight for us. On the battlefield, another Korth vessel exploded, sending shock waves rippling outward. Human fighters darted clear just in time, regrouping to strike again. The void burned with fire and debris, the light of war reflecting off the silent, broken planet below. Ryan kept his voice firm. Hold the line. No ship falls alone. His crew moved without hesitation, their discipline carrying them through the storm. Slowly, the balance began to shift. The Korth had arrived expecting prey. Instead, they had found predators just as fierce as themselves, predators forged on a world where survival was never easy. And for the first time in the battle, the Korth began to realize they were facing something they could not easily crush. The void burned with fire. Human ships and Korth vessels clashed in a storm of light and metal, each strike shaking the stars. The human fleet fought with precision, but the Korth pressed with brute force, their dark ships cutting forward like blades. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Ryan stood tall, his eyes locked on the tactical display. Red markers still outnumbered the blue, yet the humans held their ground. Each order he gave was sharp, steady, and his crew carried it out without hesitation. Enemy destroyer closing on our right flank, the tactical officer reported. Cruisers, pivot, Ryan commanded. Box them in. Two human cruisers moved in perfect unison, their engines flaring bright. They caught the Korth destroyer between them, firing broadside after broadside. The enemy vessel shook, its shields collapsing under the relentless assault. A final volley tore it apart, leaving only fragments drifting in silence. But victory came at a cost. A human carrier took heavy fire from two enemy frigates, its shields flickering. Fighters rushed back to defend it, swarming the attackers. The carrier held, but smoke poured from its damaged hull. Ryan's jaw tightened. He knew the Korth were testing for weakness, trying to break their formation. But humanity's strength had always been different. They did not scatter when pressed. They endured. All ships, tighten the line, Ryan ordered. No gaps. Push forward. The fleet obeyed. Frigates filled the spaces between larger ships, creating a solid wall of fire. Fighters struck in waves, hitting engines and weapon mounts with ruthless accuracy. Slowly, the humans forced the Korth to retreat a step. On board the human medical bay, the Vera survivors watched with wide eyes. The child who had once trembled now clung to the viewport, whispering every time a human ship struck down an enemy. To her, these strange, fierce humans were not monsters. They were shields standing between her people and death. The elder beside her spoke in awe. They do not fight only to survive. They fight to protect. Back in the battle, the Korth responded with fury. Their largest ship, a battle cruiser, moved forward. Its massive cannons charged, glowing with deadly energy. One blast could tear apart a cruiser, maybe even the Resolute itself. Target lock on their cruiser, the weapons officer warned. Ryan's eyes narrowed. He did not hesitate. All forward batteries, fire now. The Resolute unleashed a storm. Its heavy cannons roared, joined by missile salvos from two nearby cruisers. The void lit with fire as the combined strike slammed into the Korth battle cruiser. Its shields cracked, energy spilling like shattered glass. The enemy fired back, but their blast came late and wide, missing the human flagship by a narrow margin. Fighters darted in, launching torpedoes that ripped into the weakened hull. With a final explosion, the massive ship broke apart, scattering burning fragments into the dark. A cheer erupted across the human fleet. But Ryan did not smile. His voice remained steady. Stay sharp. They are not beaten yet. The Korth formation wavered. They had expected fear, not defiance. They had expected weakness, not fury. Now they saw a fleet of Deathworlders who fought as if survival itself was carved into their bones. And still, the humans pressed forward. The Resolute cut through enemy lines, its escort frigates shielding its advance. Ryan gave calm, precise orders, each one striking like a hammer. Left wing, close gap. Fighters, sweep their rear line. Push them back into the planet's shadow. The Korth, used to breaking their prey, began to falter. Their ships collided in the chaos, their formations breaking apart. One by one, human ships tore through them, leaving only wreckage behind. From the medical bay, the Vera survivors wept as they watched. Not from fear, but from relief. For the first time in years, they saw their hunters pushed back. For the first time, hope burned brighter than despair. Still, the battle was not over. A sudden explosion rocked a human cruiser, tearing a hole in its side. Escape pods launched as fire consumed the vessel. The sight shook the fleet, but Ryan's voice steadied them. "No ship falls alone," he said firmly. "Protect the pods. Hold the line." Fighters rushed to shield the survivors, blasting apart enemy ships that tried to strike the escape craft. Every life was defended, every loss carried by all. This was humanity's way. The Korth tried one last charge, pushing with desperate force. But the humans met them head-on. The clash was brutal, light and fire blinding in the void. For every human ship damaged, 2 enemy vessels fell. The fleet fought like a storm that could not be stopped. At last, the Korth began to retreat. Their ships turned, engines burning as they fled into the dark. Debris floated where once their fleet had stood strong. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell as the last enemy vanished from sensors. The humans had held. They had endured. And they had won. Ryan exhaled slowly. His crew looked to him, waiting. He gave only one order. "Stand down from battle stations. See to the wounded. And keep watch. They will come again." His words carried calm strength, but every person on that bridge knew the truth. The galaxy had just learned a lesson when Deathworlders fought: they did not bend, and they did not break. The battlefield slowly grew quiet. Where once fire had filled the void, now only drifting wreckage remained. The Korth ships had fled, leaving behind fragments of their broken fleet. Among the silence, the human vessels held formation, their shields dimming as the last threat vanished from sensors. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Ryan stood at the center, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. The victory was theirs, yet he knew it was not the end. "Report," he said firmly. "Minor damage to several ships," the tactical officer replied. "We lost 1 cruiser and 1 frigate. Casualties heavy, but most escape pods were recovered. Enemy presence, cleared from system." Ryan gave a slow nod. Loss was part of every battle, yet the cost today had been far less than it might have been. Against superior numbers, the human fleet had endured, had struck back, and had driven the hunters away. Across the medical bay, the Vera survivors clung to one another. Some wept openly, unable to believe they still lived. Others sat in stunned silence, watching as human crews tended to the wounded. The child who had once trembled now smiled faintly, her small hands clutching the medic's arm. "They came," she whispered. "They stayed." The elder placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes glistening. "Yes. Against the hunters, they stood like a wall. Deathworlders, protectors." Meanwhile, Ryan prepared his next move. "Bring us into low orbit," he ordered. "Scan the surface. There may still be survivors." The fleet descended toward the ruined planet, their ships gliding above blackened cities and scorched land. Scanners swept wide, reaching deep into the shadows of broken structures. For long minutes, nothing appeared. Then, faint signals flickered to life. "Commander," said the science officer, his voice tight with urgency. "We're detecting life signs. Small groups scattered across the surface. They are weak, but alive." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Prepare landing teams. We're not leaving anyone behind." Transports launched from the carriers, streaking down through the burned atmosphere. Human soldiers and medics landed on shattered ground, their boots crunching on ash and rubble. They moved quickly, guided by scanners, calling out into ruins that once had been homes. From the broken streets, survivors emerged. Thin, weary Veras stumbled into the light, their faces filled with disbelief as they saw human soldiers reaching out to them. Food, water, and medical aid were given freely. Where once despair ruled, now hope returned. One survivor fell to his knees before a squad of humans, his voice shaking. "We thought all was lost. We thought no one would hear us." The squad leader lifted him gently. "You called. We heard." As hours passed, more survivors were found. Caves, shelters, and collapsed buildings revealed families who had endured the firestorm. Each group, when guided to safety, looked at their rescuers with awe. These humans, feared across the stars for their Deathworld strength, showed no cruelty. They offered only protection. Back aboard the Resolute, the Vera elder watched as transports returned, each carrying more of his people. His voice shook when he spoke to Ryan. "We thought our story was finished. Yet here you are, writing a new one for us. Why? Why risk so much for strangers?" Ryan's answer was simple. "Because no one should face the dark alone." The words spread quickly among the Vera. They repeated them to each other as they reunited with lost families, as they accepted food and water, as they finally rested without fear. By the time the last transport lifted off the surface, thousands of survivors had been saved. The planet was broken, but its people were not erased. Humanity had given them a future. That night, if night could be measured in the endless void, the human fleet stood guard in orbit. Fires still burned on the surface, but above it, a wall of steel now shielded the survivors. The Vera child sat with the medic who had first reached out to her. She leaned against his arm, her voice soft. "Will the hunters come back?" The medic looked at her, then at the silent strength of the fleet outside the window. "Maybe. But if they do, they will find us waiting." Her eyes closed, and for the first time in her life, she slept without fear. On the bridge, Ryan stood in silence. He looked at the ruined world below, then at the fleet spread across the stars. He knew this was more than one victory. Word would spread. Other species would hear that when the weak cried out, humans came. And when they fought, they did not stop until the enemy fled. Ryan turned to his crew. His voice was calm, steady as always. "We've given them hope. That is the true victory." And for the first time since the signal had been heard, the void felt less empty. Humanity had saved the world, and the galaxy was beginning to understand the meaning of a Deathworlder's promise. The ruins of the Vera world still glowed faintly beneath the human fleet. Fires smoldered across the surface, but above it, steel and determination stood watch. The Korth had been driven away, and survivors had been saved. Yet the echoes of the battle did not end in that system. Across nearby trade routes, word began to spread. At first it was whispers carried by merchant ships. Stories told of a human fleet that had arrived when no one else dared. The tale grew quickly, passing from one system to another. They heard the call, some said, and they did not hesitate. Others spoke with awe, their voices low. The humans struck the Korth, and the Korth fled. On distant stations, crowds gathered to hear the news. Many found it hard to believe. The Korth had long been seen as unstoppable raiders, a shadow that no weak world could resist. Yet the humans, the Deathworlders known for their harsh origin, had stood against them and won. For the Vera survivors, the truth was not a rumor. It was living memory. Within the medical bays of human ships, they shared their story again and again. They told of the hunters who had broken their cities, of the despair that had filled their hearts, and of the moment the human fleet arrived like fire in the dark. They did not abandon us, the elder said firmly to every visitor who came to listen. They did not ask what they would gain. They fought because we called. And they did not stop until the enemy fled. The child, no longer trembling, repeated Ryan's words wherever she went. No one should face the dark alone, she whispered to other children. Soon, those words became a phrase repeated by many Vera, a symbol of the hope they had regained. Meanwhile, the Korth themselves felt the weight of shame. Across their raiding clans, commanders argued in anger. The story of their defeat spread faster than they could silence it. Other prey would hear. Other worlds might believe they too could resist. One Korth captain slammed his fist against the table during a council. They are humans, Deathworlders. They fight like beasts, without fear. If they spread their reach, the balance of power will change. But fear had already begun to settle among the raiders. For the first time, the Korth had tasted the fury of a people who refused to bend. Back on the Resolute, Ryan stood in the command center, listening to reports from nearby systems. Merchants now traveled with more confidence when human ships were near. Small colonies sent messages of thanks, even if they had never met a human. The story of the fleet stand had become larger than the battle itself. The tactical officer turned from his console. Commander, channels across 3 sectors are repeating the same phrase. They call it the Deathworlder promise. Ryan raised an eyebrow. And what is that? The officer recited the words with a faint smile. If you call for help, they will come. Ryan gave a quiet nod. He had not spoken those words himself, but they reflected the truth of what had happened. Humanity had chosen to answer a cry in the dark, and now the galaxy was listening. In the days that followed, more species reached out. Some asked for aid against raiders. Others offered friendship or trade. For the first time, many began to see humans not only as dangerous beings forged by a hostile world, but as allies who stood firm when others fell. Yet Ryan knew this attention would bring new challenges. Humanity had revealed its strength openly. The Korth would not forget. Other powers would take notice. Some would seek alliance, others would test their resolve. On the viewing deck, Ryan spoke quietly to his second officer. We have changed more than a battle. We have changed how they see us. And once the galaxy sees you in a new light, there is no going back. The officer nodded. Do you think they will come for us again? Ryan's gaze drifted toward the stars. Yes. But if they do, they will not find us unprepared. That same night, among the survivors, the elder gathered his people. He looked at their tired but hopeful faces and said, Our world was broken, but we are not erased. We live because the Deathworlders came. Remember this. Pass it on. When you hear their name, do not speak it with fear. Speak it with respect. The Vera bowed their heads, some weeping quietly. Their story would live, and it would carry across the stars. And so the message spread further, no longer just whispers but a wave that reached every corner of the sector. A warning to raiders. A comfort to the weak. A promise carried by the actions of one fleet. Humanity had shown its hand, and now the galaxy understood the Deathworlders had heard an alien SOS, and their fleet had struck without mercy. The human fleet lingered in orbit above the broken Vera world, their engines glowing softly against the void. The last survivors had been brought aboard transports, given food, water, and care. The ruined planet lay beneath them, a reminder of what had been lost, and what had been saved. Commander Ryan stood on the bridge of the Resolute, looking out at the stars. The Korth had fled, but their presence still lingered like a shadow. He knew word of the fleet's actions would spread quickly, reaching allies, rivals, and enemies alike. Humanity's reputation was growing, and it would not be forgotten. "Commander," the communications officer said, "we are receiving messages from multiple sectors. Some are calls for aid. Others are warnings." Ryan's gaze did not waver. "Put them all on the main channel. Let the galaxy hear the truth." Soon, voices and messages filled the fleet's communication network. Traders, colonists, and explorers sent words of gratitude. They spoke of fear that had once ruled their worlds and how the human fleet had answered a call in the darkest hour. Some messages were from species who had never met humans, yet they praised them for courage, discipline, and mercy. Ryan listened quietly. Then, when the messages quieted, he opened a channel to broadcast across all nearby systems. His voice was calm but carried weight. "If you call for help, we will come," he said. "If you harm the weak, we will find you. Humanity does not seek endless war. We do not hunt for power. But we do protect those who cannot protect themselves. And those who prey on the helpless will meet the full strength of Deathworlders." The words spread like fire. Across the galaxy, species paused to listen. Some shivered at the warning, others felt hope stirring. Traders spoke of humans with new respect, and diplomats revised their reports. The reputation of humanity was no longer just fear, it was honor, strength, and resolve. Meanwhile, the Vera survivors gathered in the fleet's common hall. The elder looked at them, his voice steady. "They have given us more than life. They have given us hope. Remember their promise. Remember their courage. Carry it with you always." The child who had once trembled now stood beside him. She held the words in her heart, repeating them quietly. No one should face the dark alone. She smiled, and for the first time, the fear that had followed her for years was gone. On the Resolute, Ryan met with his officers. "We cannot stay long," he said. "The Korth may regroup. Other species may test us. But we have sent our message. They now know what humanity will do." The tactical officer nodded. "They will think twice before attacking weak worlds. And the survivors will speak of us wherever they go." Ryan allowed himself a brief moment of thought. This was more than a mission. It was a declaration. Humanity had acted when others might have hesitated. They had struck against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. They had saved lives and sent a warning across the stars. As the fleet prepared to depart, transports carrying Vera survivors returned to orbit with the last groups rescued from the surface. Families were reunited, tears of relief flowing freely. The child held the hand of the medic who had first guided her from danger. She looked up at the fleet, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Will they always protect us?" Ryan overheard her words and smiled faintly. "When you need help, we will come. But remember, strength comes in many forms. You must protect what you can, too." The Vera elder approached Ryan, his expression solemn but grateful. "You are not only warriors. You are guardians. We will tell everyone. We will never forget. Ryan nodded. Good. Let them remember. With final checks completed, the human fleet disengaged orbit and began the long journey back to human space. Engines burned bright as the fleet slipped into warp, leaving the ruined world behind, yet leaving behind hope and survival for its people. Across the galaxy, news of the events spread faster than any fleet could travel. Traders repeated the story. Colonists whispered it in fear and awe. Raiders reconsidered their actions, knowing that humans now answered calls for help with unyielding force. Diplomats recorded every detail, writing that humanity was a force to be respected, feared, and, for those who needed protection, relied upon. Back on the bridge of the Resolute, Ryan looked at his crew. They had done more than fight a battle. They had sent a message to the stars. Today, he said softly, we have done more than protect the weak. We have shown what humanity is. Let them remember this day. Let every world know the meaning of a Deathworlders' promise. The crew stood quietly, knowing the weight of their actions. They had faced enemies, protected the helpless, and emerged stronger. Humanity's name would echo across the stars not only as warriors, but as guardians, as protectors who struck without mercy against those who harmed the innocent. As the Resolute and its fleet sped away into the dark expanse, the Vera survivors looked up at the stars, knowing that humanity had changed their lives forever. The child whispered once more, no one should face the dark alone. And in the quiet of space, that promise carried far and wide. The galaxy had heard. The message was clear. Humanity would come when needed. And those who preyed on the weak would learn that Deathworlders struck without mercy.